I'm going to do a series of conferences, 4 of them on angels and demons and demonic influence and that type of thing, going into various distinctions and categories, how to deal with it. Principally because of the fact that I think that most people don't really understand how spiritual warfare works. They don't understand angels very well. They don't understand certain things that can get them into trouble. And if they do get into trouble, they very often don't know how to get back out and that type of thing. So I thought it would be a good idea to actually cover that. So in the first conference, I want to talk about angels and demons so that people actually have a proper understanding of them. Angels, of course, are pure spirits. They don't have a body, even though they're often depicted as bodies. One of the things I often rail against is, and this is something that exorcists generally don't particularly like seeing, is angels portrayed as women. And the reason being is because whenever demons appear in the form of women, it's to denigrate the human form. And not that there's anything wrong with the female form. That's exactly the opposite of the case. But the problem is that it's done in order to act contrary to the fact that angels are normally portrayed in the masculine form, because of the fact that their job to provide and to protect the person that they're guarding, and that is principally the function of men, to provide and protect their family. But the point of all that is that even though they're depicted in masculine form, they should be. In fact, it's only until recently that you started seeing angels kind of crop up in female form. But the reason that they don't actually have a body, so they're not really masculine or feminine. They don't have a particular gender because they don't reproduce that way. They're created immediately by God. They're endowed with intelligence and free will, so they have no body. They only have 2 faculties. That is, by faculty, it's this ability to do something. And that is, they intellectually understand, and they make choices. Since angels only have one motive power, that is the thing that moves them, that is the will, they are stronger and more powerful. Their wills are stronger and more powerful than ours. And their will is as strong as it's proportionate to their intellect. Their intellect is proportionate to their substance. We'll talk about what that all means here in a minute. But basically what it means is that their wills are strong, far more powerful than ours. And this is one of the reasons why sometimes when people come under their influence, their ability to fight them off is extremely difficult because their will is far stronger than ours. Of course, the degree in which they can influence people is determined ultimately by God. So that's how much of the will they can use, and the strength of the will that they can use in a relationship with a particular individual is determined ultimately by God. They were, from the very instance of their creation, had diffused knowledge. Now, by that we mean they had the knowledge of all of the essences of created things, which basically means this. They knew everything there was to know about trees, everything there was to know about the nature of human beings, everything there was to know about the nature of angels and things. God is a different matter because his nature can't be contained by a creative influence. But they did have a natural knowledge of God that far excelled ours. They didn't know the course of human events, save a few things, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But they had all this knowledge, which means that not only are they more intelligent than we are, they're far more knowledgeable than we are. Which means they can look at a set of circumstances and also predict much more accurately where things are going to head and things of this sort. So you get people like Nostradamus, whose predictions were done by sorcery, which is why the church condemned him. They're about 80% accurate, and that's because the 2 things that demons don't know are the providential plan, or what they call the divine economy regarding grace. And that means that they don't really know exactly whether God is going to give specific graces to particular individuals or not. Because the grace can actually change people's choices, and that they also don't know. They don't know the individual choices of human beings until after they occur. They can usually get a pretty good idea because they can look at somebody and think, because of this person's past history, because of his disposition, he's most likely to do X. And then from that, they can factor in a number of things, so they can kind of predict where the future is headed, but not perfectly accurately. So their infused knowledge came immediately at the point of their creation, but then as things happen, those things that happen are infused in their intellect. which means that for an angel, if he wants to know what's going on anywhere in the world at all he has to do is, with his will, move his intellect to consider that thing. They know all of the particular events that are going throughout the world now as they occur. Not future ones, but as they occur. They know all past history, they know all, except for those things which occur in our own interior lives. Angels communicate by getting a concept in their mind, and then through the will, applying that, or indicating to another angel that they want to communicate, the other angel gives consent, and then as a result, that angel acts upon the intellect of the other angel, and then he receives the concept that he's thinking about. That's how they communicate. It's basically a form of telepathy. That is also the same way they communicate with us. That is, because they only have an intellect and will, they move us, they affect us, acting upon our bodies principally. We'll see a little bit more about that. But it's basically a form of telepathy. At least that's the modern term that most people would be familiar with. Because they don't have a body, they're purely spiritual like God. Because they don't have a body, they're not in a place. Now, some people say, my guardian angel's here with me. Well, what do you mean by here? Yes, it's true. He's here in the sense that his activity is occurring at a particular location. Because remember, through the will, they can actually cause things in us. And so we say an angel is here because he actually causes activity in a particular location. But place is only pertains to those things that are physical. And so as a result, angels are never in a place. This is one of the reasons why, just by changing their thought, they can act upon something here and then instantaneously be acting on something someplace else in the world. And so, because they're not bound by place, they don't have to travel like we do. Angels are said to be in a place by the application of the wills to some physical thing, nor are they in time. They're not in time. Now, if you actually look at created things, and God, you take him into consideration as well, there are in fact 3 different states in relationship to time. There's those who are in time, that's us, and time is that which has a beginning and an end. We're created at certain points, time will come to an end when Christ returns. So it has a beginning and an end. Then there's what they call, and that's what human beings are in as long as they have a body. Their soul is not in time, but their body is. Physical things are in time. Then there's what they call the Aver, and that is the thing in which spiritual things exist. It's not in time because it has a beginning, but it has no end. It has sequence of events, but it's not measured in the same way that time is. So angels are actually outside of time, but they act in time, and what's happening in time is infused in their minds as it happens. Okay. And then the third one is what they call the eternity. In Latin, it's the eternity. And that's only God, because he has neither beginning nor end. So they're not in time, but their activities do occur in time by the application, again, of their will to some particular thing. They were created by God out of nothing. They were first brought into existence in the state of innocence, so they hadn't committed any sin. In the state of grace, so they had sanctifying grace in their souls. And they were endowed with virtues of faith, hope, and charity. Angels have no other virtues other than originally they had faith, hope, and charity. And the reason they don't have any other virtues is because virtue determines how I relate to a particular thing. They don't have that kind of a situation, such a relationship to God. Physical things, it's not like they have to worry about eating too much. It's not like Ghostbusters, you see the thing wolfing down on hamburgers or something. They don't do that kind of thing. So as a result, they don't have to have the other virtues. But then, there was what's called the 3 instances of the angels. The first 3 instances. The first is they were created in an act of knowing. What does that mean? Well, with us, we've got to wake up in the morning and drink a sufficient amount of coffee before the brain functions, right? And even then, we've got to think about something for a while before we really understand. That's not how angels function. The instance they consider a thing, they fully exhaust everything there is to know about that thing instantaneously, to the degree that their intellect is capable. So when they were first created, they were created in this immediately act of knowing. That immediate act of knowing included their assigned task from God. This is what God said, this is what you are to do. Now, every assigned task with the angels had a relationship to Christ in some fashion, either proximately or remotely. So, in the case of Lucifer, for example, when he said, "Not serve him, I will not serve," he actually rejected his assigned task, which was to be the bearer of knowledge and light to other creatures, but he was also communicated to the angels, was communicated that Christ, God, is going to become man. And that in that process, they were going to have to serve this God-man if they were to be saved. This meant that all men and all angels were saved by virtue of Christ, or they're all damned by virtue of Christ. So it means that they were told something that, this is your assigned task, this is how it relates to Christ. Now, what Satan could not accept, because he was the highest angel created, he could not accept the fact that there would be a woman, the lowest of intellectual creatures, who would so far excel him in grace and knowledge of God that she would excel everybody combined, even him. Which meant that his place as the highest would be superseded by someone even higher. And when he said, "No, I will not serve," St. Alphonsus, or St. Louis de Montfort tells us that he rejected Christ under the aspect of Mary. He would not accept her. And so what's the punishment as fits the crime? That's why in the Old Testament we read, "She shall crush your head." Because you didn't do that, okay, because you didn't accept her, she's going to be the one that's going to crush you ultimately. All of the demons that rejected Christ rejected him under some aspect. So it means, for example, there's one exorcist I know, he's dealing with one particular individual who's possessed, and the demon actually rejected Christ under the aspect of his mercy. He would not accept the fact that Christ is going to be merciful to men, because remember that angels have no mercy. There's no mercy to them, which I'm going to talk about in just a little bit. Okay, so the first instance is they're created in this act of fully knowing their assigned task, that relationship to Christ. So, for example, your guardian angel's first thought communicated to him was that he was going to be assigned to take care of you so that you may be saved by Christ. That meant that one of two things either happened. Either accept that, so the first instance created an act of knowing. The second instance, St. Thomas tells us they either accepted it or they rejected it. Now remember, it's not like us. Human beings are kind of
so pumped because I just picked up my 1-800 contacts order. This is literally the best place to order your contacts. Let me tell you why. First off, I ordered these 2 days ago.
clueless. We're pretty stupid. And so that's why God has mercy on us. I always tell people mercy is for the contrite and the stupid. And that's basically what it is. Adam and Eve just really weren't that bright. I mean, they were extremely intelligent, far more than we were, but the fact of the matter is they just didn't have it like the angels have it. And that's the real reason why God has, one of the principal foundational reasons why God has mercy on us, because we're just really not all there intellectually. And so what he'll do is he'll cut us some slack as long as we're sorry, right? Well, the angels were stupid. So when they made their choice, they fully understood all of the ramifications, all of the punishment that would come from it, and all of the merit that would come from it if they chose the right thing. So when they made a choice, it was absolutely and fully volitional. And so in the second instance, they either chose to accept their assigned task or reject it. In the third instance, then, because they're not like us, see, the reason why we're around for a while, even after we commit mortal sin, is because of the fact that God will give us a chance to get, very often, not always, but God gives us chances in order to get our acts together so that we can get into heaven. But that's not the way it is with demons, or with angels. They either do the right thing or they don't. And once they do that, their wills are locked into that choice permanently, forever. Not like human beings where we vacillate back and forth. And that's because of the fact that our knowledge is not as clear as it could be, and so we can vacillate. Whereas with the angels, there is no vacillation. So when they choose, their wills become confirmed in that thing instantaneous. So they're either confirmed in the good or they're confirmed in the bad. Then that being the case, the third instance of their creation, so we're talking about boom, 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 they were either damned or they got to see God immediately. Now, you're going to hear from time to time people say things like, oh, well, there's this section, this battle, and heaven out for violence, and the angels weren't really clear, and they don't really show it. That's just all false. Don't listen to it. I know it's in some of the popular books, but it's simply not true. These choices were made immediately. This is one of the reasons why. Well, how do we know this? Christ himself said it about Satan. He was a liar from the beginning. Which meant from the first instance of his choice, that's it, boom. Okay, now that being the case, then after that, the spiritual warfare began. So then they started trying to beat up on each other, of course. And remember when I told you they can take an axe to the will and apply it to the other angel, and if the other angel gives consent, they'll say yes to it. Well, that's basically how they engage in spiritual warfare amongst each other. And if you came to a certain point, of course, where God said that's enough. Okay. Those angels which sustained the test given to them by God were then given the beatific vision and are now mediators for us to pray for them. The angels that fell which were created good by God and then became evil through their own fault. Now this means, for example, one of the things that can actually inspire your devotion to your own guardian angel is the fact that his choice was to accept you as his directee. And so because to will the good, the definition of love is to will the good of another. When he accepted you, it was an act of love. His first act was an act of love for you. And under the aspect of God, of course, that's what it was. It was an act of charity. And so some people say, well, what happens if mine said no? God assigns you no. Right. So don't worry, you got one somewhere. The angels are created in a hierarchy called the 9 choirs based upon the differences in categories of their assigned functions, their assigned tasks by God. And this hierarchy is based upon the degree of their intelligence. The more intelligent they are, the higher they are in the hierarchy. Now, in human beings, we all have the same substance. We're all human natures. We all we're composed of body and soul. So we're all equal on that level. Regardless of race, regardless of gender, etc., we're all equal on that level. And the other thing is that, but with angels, they're not the same. Each one is specifically different from the other. And by specifically different, they are so radically different from each other that there are even the differences between them is more extreme between an amoeba and a human being almost on a certain level, between an amoeba and a cow and a horse and that. They're so radically different. And that's what exorcists will often say. They'll say when you experience the personality of the being, because there's a principle, it's called the principle of the cause and the effect. The cause is always present in some way in the effect. And so very often the demons will act upon the priest and they'll experience that the demon's personality, because there's a certain aspect of his personality that's communicated in the process. And the distinctness of their personalities is so profound that you begin to realize why St. Thomas was absolutely right. They're not the same. It's not like there's angelic nature and then there's different angels. No, every single angelic nature is different from the other ones. Okay. And that means that there's a certain hierarchy of theirs, and so because the differences in them, although it's based principally on how close they are to God in their nature. So the greater the substance, the more powerful their intellect, and therefore the more powerful the will. But the more powerful their intellect, the higher they are in the hierarchy. That meant that Satan being on the top was in fact the most intelligent of all created creatures on a purely natural level. The first hierarchy, so there's a general hierarchy, but in the hierarchy of break, this hierarchy is sometimes broken down into sub-hierarchies. So there's 3 sub-hierarchies. And the first sub-hierarchy is defined as the first 3 choirs, so there's ranks or choirs. And these are sometimes called the counselors because they stand before the throne of God. So the first hierarchy is called the counselors. This is broken into the first, or the highest rank, which is the seraphim. And these stand before the face of God. The name seraphim means light or love. St. Thomas says that this is because being so close to God, which is the furnace of charity, God being the furnace of charity, they burn with love of God and being closest to the source of light. The seraphim are considered in this system to be the highest ranking angels and sit at the right hand of God in a certain sense. Christ ultimately does, of course. But the point is that if you're talking about a mere creature, they're the closest. And so they're the most, St. Thomas says that the principal aspect of the seraphim is love. They're associated with the healing fire in the Old Testament, are depicted as having 16 faces and a radiance which makes it impossible for any creature or other angel to look upon them. At least that's the way they're depicted. They can, of course, communicate with other angels and stuff. They are also usually described as having 3 pairs of wings, although angels don't have real wings, of course, because they don't fly from place to place. The wings signify the fact that, as I said before, they can apply what they're doing in one place and then instantly change their apply them to another place. And so you think that, the fastest creatures tend to be those that fly, and so we tend to ascribe, they have wings. And also the wings are also considered to be things which can protect. So those that are, can contain within under the wings, and so that's one of the reasons too we depict them with wings. Then the second one is the cherubim. These are the knowledge angels, sometimes what they're called, because they pass on the information to the angels beneath them, which they gain from God and from the seraphim. Normally, the seraphim do not have involvement with those below them insofar as they are created principally for the worship of God alone. What it basically means is there were 7 seraphim which God created in the beginning, and their principal function is just to gaze upon Him all the time and give Him worship. That was their principal function. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't communicate with other angels, and they do communicate knowledge to other angels, but that was their principal function. They are mentioned in Exodus 25 as having carved the figures, or simply having been the figures, depending on the biblical translation, for the Ark of the Covenant. Also said to have been posted at the entrance to paradise after Adam and Eve were driven out. They were depicted as having 2 pairs of wings and 4 faces and stand for eternal vision, vigilance, and knowledge. Sometimes they're said to drive God's chariot for Him, serve as His bookkeeping service. Not sure quite how that works. And maintain the hosts of heaven. The host is a throng of angels that goes to battle. Sometimes they're said to know divine secrets, not known to others about God. This is based upon the fact that they're more intelligent. Now, that's only because of that. If we were talking about on a natural level, and sometimes God does communicate to them things, even that is secretive knowledge on a higher level, it's not communicated to the lower angels. But when the final judgment occurs, all things will. Then the thrones, that's the next, are the service angels, or the footstool of God. They're depicted as with many eyes and serve as the wheels for the chariot of God. They are said to have been assigned the task of fulfilling the justice of God, which is why they are called the thrones. Their power lies in humility. Although they are said to shine as brightly as the seraphim and cherubim, their humility allows them to be objectively cast judgments on behalf of God. And basically what the thrones are is they're the ones who communicate the knowledge of the higher ranks of angels down to the lower ranks. The second hierarchy, so we've got the first hierarchy, which has the 3 ranks, and then we have another second hierarchy, which is going to have another 3 ranks. This group is known as the rulers, the governors, and the guiding agents of the planets. That's what the theology and some theory was in the medieval period. In point in fact, the angels guide planets in their orbits and things of this sort. The first is the dominations. They represent God's power and carry out the commands of God. They are administrators who are depicted wearing green and gold outfits and carry both a sword and a scepter. They regulate the work of the other angels and keep a close watch on even the most intimate small details of existence. So in other words, they're the administrators. The angels above are principally about knowledge, and they communicate that knowledge to the lower decks, the thrones. The thrones then turn around and they execute that knowledge. That's their job. They're administrators who say, okay, you guys go do this. The next is the principalities. And these signify leaders. They're the ministering angels and protectors of rulers. So what this means is that when someone becomes president or they become a king or something like that, an angel from the rank of principality is assigned to take care of him and to protect him. Sometimes referred to as the authorities, they are said to have the task of waging war against the demons. They guard the paths between heaven and earth and assist humans in resisting temptation. Some hold that Lucifer is said to have been of this choir, but in point in fact, he was actually the highest, not of a lower rank. The powers is the next rank. So there's the dominations, principalities, and powers. These were commissioned to remove the obstacles which interfere with God's commands. They are said to look out on the goings-on in cities, towns, houses. So God actually will assign an angel to your house, to your family sometimes, and any structure that contains humans. They are said to be given fairly frequent permission to deal one-on-one with mortals. They hold the power to move the hearts and minds of humankind when deemed necessary. They tend to aim for guiding and regulating the ideas of world leaders for maximum results. So that's their real function. Okay, so it's kind of, you've got the administrators and the people who guide in the middle. Then you've got the people who actually do the work. So it's all like management. You've got the guys who really know what's going on. Then you got the administration. And then you've got the guys who actually execute it, the guys in the field. Which sometimes are not distinct as far as the guys who know what's really going on. At least in human beings, but in angels it's different. This third hierarchy is called the messengers of God. And the first rank is called the virtues. They exercise power over the material world, presiding over the laws of nature and maintaining order. They are also said to perform administrative duties similar to those of the dominations, but they are most specifically assigned to the details of our world and the cosmos. They are said to keep planets and stars moving in their proper order and looking after the weather on Earth. Now, the reality of that, the truth of that particular last part of that statement will become really clear when I talk about demons of the air later. They also are said to do a bit of work with bestowing characters such as valor and truth in the souls of mortals. They are the patron angels of the saints. In other words, there are some people that just get a higher angel than other people. According to St. Thomas, they also regulate miracles as well. The next is archangels. They fulfill the important missions to man and preside over the governance of countries, cities, and dioceses. The most historical ambiguous of the angels, sometimes called the leaders of the entire angel command. In other words, we seem to know the least amount about them in a certain sense, although there's some particular ones within them that we know a lot about. But there's some of them that we don't know a whole lot about. But basically, they're the ones that they're the commanders in the field, so to speak, with the other angels. This stems from their original angel hierarchy, where they were only two types of angels. Some say that there's only really two classes: are angels and archangels. And traditionally, after St. Gregory the Great on, it was always distinguished between these 9 choirs. And part of that is based upon the various statements stated in the Old Testament by St. Paul in his letters, other thrones, principalities, and powers. So there's certain ways which we know that these are the actual names and their functions. They're field commanders in the field of battle against evil and the fallen angels under Satan's command. To mankind they impart comfort, solace, and inner strength through the unconditional love, usually in the darkest moments. People of greater importance and who hold certain offices are assigned a guardian archangel. And this is very common, actually. So, for example, for a priest, he gets 2 guardian angels. He gets the ones that was assigned to him at the time in which he was created. And then, once he's ordained, he gets another one, which is actually very, very beneficial. And that sometimes priests can make great use of, especially if there's people in their parish or under their pastoral care that are being attacked or suffering from some type of demonic influence. You can tell the guardian angel priest is doing protect this individual. One exorcist one time actually did that, and after the person contacted the exorcist and said, "This is what happened." There were 4 dark things around me, and then a bigger one came in and cleared them all out. So that's one of the signs that priests have a guardian angel, which is quite stuffed. Then there are guardian angels. They watch over the spiritual and physical life of and obtain gifts from God to them. They don't get a special name, although sometimes they're called the guardians or guardian angels. But not every angel from that rank is a guardian. While all guardian angels initially are from that rank, not all of them that are in that rank are. Some of them deal with other things. They're said to focus on being caretakers for mortal humans. All guardian angels are from this class, except those pertaining to the offices or of those individuals who have an extreme importance historically. If you could actually see a guardian angel, it would probably give you some kind of a clue about what God intended for your life. The number of angels. Considering that every person receives his own guardian angel, and that from the choir of angels there are more angels than there were assigned to man. So from the first rank, you have at least the number of angels which pertain to all the guardian angels for all the human beings that ever existed, plus those that were assigned, plus those who would have fallen for that. That's just from your one rank. And then you have all the other ranks above that. It's pyramidal, so as you get up higher, there's less and less of them in each particular rank. That means that of the angels, there's probably in the order of hundreds of billions. They say, you can't put a number on it, you can't quite quantify it this way, but they say that the material created universe which we see only accounts for 5% of God's creation. That the angels actually constitute not the other 95%. Obviously, the number is questionable because you can't really set a number to them. And you can't compare a spiritual substance to an immaterial substance quantitatively in a certain sense. Okay. But the point is that there's far more of them than there are of us. The demons. They were once created in a state of grace, but they fell in the second instance and they were damned in the third. They lost all the power that pertains to the grace that they had, but none that pertains to their intellect and will. They're just as intelligent as they used to be. Now, human beings are different. Every time we commit a sin, we get dumb and stupid. And every time we do it, we get dumber. Okay. Whereas every time we do an act of virtue, do the right thing, the brighter we get. So, the moral to the story is that doesn't apply to demons. Their intelligence is not lost. Their infused knowledge is not lost. They still know everything that's going on. It's infused in them as things go on. They know everything. This is one of the reasons why you can tell someone's possessed. They're telling you things are going on in some other place, in some other room, and there's no way this individual could be there to know. Their intelligence is so far above ours that we stand absolutely no chance in relationship with them except by means of grace, which enlightens our minds above their knowledge. They do not have darkness of intellect, again, as I mentioned, but they don't know future events. They don't know what God, as I said, is going, which graces He's going to give to particular individuals. They know some graces. There are some people who become possessed through no fault of their own because they're targeted by demons because that particular individual is to play a pivotal or a key role or a very important role in history. And so this is, they're just targeted individuals. You can see it in their life. They're oppressed. Their life is just a disaster from the time it begins to the time it ends. Which usually means if your life is a disaster, you're probably supposed to be more important than you think you are. Which usually consoles people to some degree. Their wills are so powerful that the lowest angel could disintegrate the earth, or if God would allow it. They can kill us by a single act of will, but God, we know in the book of Job, said, do not touch his substance, which is a technical phrase for saying you cannot kill him. Only grace in our wills and the power of accompanying our prayers and good works can we overcome their will. The sin they commit was by rejecting their task. This means that sin also constitutes their greatest weakness, their greatest shame, and their greatest humiliation. Their name is their assigned task. So if you can find out what their name is in the exorcism, that means you know what their weakness is. And that's why they don't want you having it. Second, to name a thing constitutes a form of authority. When Adam was brought all the things to name, it was to indicate, that this is all different from you. And it was partly done so we would understand that when Eve was brought to him, okay, yeah, she's not like anything else. Okay. So there was that side of things. But it was also to indicate that to manifest his authority over them. It's why parents have the right to name their child, because they have a natural law authority over them. So once you have the name of somebody, there's a certain authority, because you can get their attention through it, there's certain things that you can do with their name, or it's the same thing with demons, but you have their name, there's a certain authority that you have over them, and that means once you know their name, you know their weakness, and you just beat them over the head with it. They possess all of the infused knowledge endowed at their creation and continue to receive this infused knowledge. This is why dealing with them is extremely dangerous and requires an absolute abandonment to God, His grace, and providence. If you ever see a guy, if you ever see a priest who thinks he's going to deal with this on his own intelligence, he is doomed. In fact, if anything they'll tell you, exorcists will tell you, is that being an exorcist is one of the most humiliating works that you will ever do, because you're constantly getting bamboozled by them. Not in bad ways, you just hope it doesn't harm people in the process. But God allows it through your humiliations to become more effective as an exorcist. It is false theology that you read from time to time, as I mentioned, they were uncertain. A battle continues in Abram after their creation, sometimes called heaven, but in fact, that is the Latin word is caelum. Caelum can have two different meanings. It can mean whatever's above us, which is the angels are always considered to be above us in some way. Or it can actually be considered the place of the residence of God, which are two distinct things. At a certain point, God gave St. Michael the power to cast the demons out of the presence of the good angels who had the beatific vision at the third instance. Satan's humiliation is that his place in heaven was taken by a woman, and he was cast down by an angel of the second lowest rank. He was humiliated. His humiliation is the worst because he is the proudest, having been the highest. Okay, so hell for demons does not include the temporal punishment. and except insofar as their wills are disordered, they suffer from pains of conscience. That's the only temporal side of their punishment. They principally suffer from pain of loss, which is, as soon as a person is judged, when you die and stand before God, one of the first things that's going to be communicated to you is your absolute need, absolute need to see God face to face to be happy. And that is communicated to the angels, and that if you don't get that need fulfilled, that's called the pain of loss. If you get it fulfilled, that's called glory or heaven, the beatific vision. So they suffer from the pain of loss. One time an exorcist had Satan on the ropes, and in the conversation, which normally the exorcists are told, don't talk to him. Just beat out what you need to know, and that's it. But because they're very deceptive and they can lead you down a path you don't want to go very quickly. But in the process, the exorcist asked Satan what his weakness, what his greatest suffering was his couldn't see God. And the exorcist forced him to tell him, something about God is the most beautiful thing there is. And Satan said, I would be drugged up and down a barbed wire pole 1,000 times just to be able to gaze on God's face for an instant. So he knows exactly what it all is. Not all of them are allowed to get out of hell. So the demons are cast down into hell. Not all of them are allowed to get out. They get out, although today you might think pretty much all of them got out. They get out of hell only by God's permissive will, either directly or indirectly. Now, by directly, it means that, you can have the book of Job. That line, if you know the Latin, it does kind of come out in the English, but it says, unde venus. That's what God says to say, unde venus. It's like, where did you come from? It's a slam. It's a total slam that, you were created for something much higher for me, but look at you. It's basically what's being said to him. And, of course, Satan doesn't respond because he can't. But the point is that God allows him to come out to afflict Job. And that's a direct case of direct. And that happens from time to God, and God will allow it in order to his glory, because God likes beating up on demons. He enjoys them. Then it can be done indirectly. And this is done by man committing an evil that pertains to the particular task of a demon in hell. Now, what does that mean? It means that when you perform certain evil actions, you open the door to demons inserting themselves into your lives. That's basically what it means. When Adam and Eve fell, they came under the domination of Satan. Why? Because this is what happened. He indicated to them a role of leadership. Do this, or eat the apple. Which meant as soon as they ate the apple, they fell under his leadership, or his authority and dominion, and therefore would be afflicted forever. Every time you sin, you increase demonic dominion over you. That doesn't mean you become possessed, it doesn't mean you become obsessed or oppressed. It just means you open the door. Not every door that gets opened does God allow a demon in. But the fact of the matter is you open the door. And there are some people who become possessed by other people opening the door. Something which I'll say now, but I'll probably stress a little bit later. In my experience, 80% of women who are raped, through no fault of their own, obviously, become demonically obsessed. 80%. That's a pretty high statistic. And it's also the same case with molestation. It's in this with rust for some reason. It depends on the resilience of the individual. Well, we're talking more about the particular mechanism that opens the door in that case later and why it happens. But other people can do things that can open the door too. This is the biggest problem with witchcraft. Because it's on the rise, it's opening the door and we're just getting flooded with these things. Witchcraft in the past, people kind of like the Salem witch trials, and people go, Okay, now granted, that's what that's done in the proper manner, but the church from the beginning has always recognized that the involvement in witchcraft is a capital crime because of the sheer evil it unleashes on people. And it's, if you ever actually have to deal with the fallout, you realize why the churches always thought it should be a capital crime. I mean, they wouldn't say that today, obviously. But historically, that's the way it was always viewed. Okay. We're going to stop there. I can answer a few questions. We'll take about a little break, I presume, and then we'll resume for the next conference. Yes.
Back to this question. All this information you're given, I've never found it anywhere in the Bible. I'm no scholar or anything like that. Why do you suppose they're watching the books and the Bible and all this stuff in it so that everybody can know it?
Actually, about 90% of it is. Principalities, powers, particularly various things. The fact that they actually were, Satan, he was a liar from the beginning. All of this. Yeah, but the point is that about 90% of this actually is in Scripture. I just didn't give the citations, because otherwise we'd be just coming from Bibles all night long. Part of it is also the fact that the church, through 2,000 years of history, has had intimate dealings with demons and angels, and actually knows this stuff in contact and dealing with them, because they tell them. You can, in an exorcism, you can actually beat out of them their rank, what their rank means, why they were given that particular assigned task. So it actually comes through the tradition. And the tradition is actually the more preeminent thing anyway in Scripture. So, because even Scripture is a piece of tradition, it's a monument. That's what most people don't realize. It's actually a part of tradition. It's just, process that we don't have tradition in you. The minute you had a Bible to somebody, it's called a tradition, passing out a monument to somebody. So, it's just which tradition you're from. Yes?
When he dies, where does your guardian angel go?
He gets released and doesn't have to do with you anymore. Yeah, that's actually it. He just goes back to heaven. And he actually meets you at your judgment. So, if you judge well. If not, he's just like, well, I'm trying. Yeah, that's actually, it's not really a name.
It's a great little thing. I've never was a whole fan.
Yeah, the stuff I've read on it has never been clear enough sufficiently for me to actually give you an answer. I mean, it's kind of all over the map. What is the Nephilim, right? Yeah.
The number of places or seats in heaven that were lost by the demons, those are going to be replaced by the saints?
Yes. So man was created, part of the reason man was created is to fulfill this hierarchy. This a hierarchy. The hierarchy of the angels is a natural hierarchy. When they fell, but the amount of grace that they have is directly proportionate to their nature. They can't go up in grace or down in grace. Human beings, you can have a little tiny old lady who's far holier than a big fat priest or, a big tall priest or whatever. But the point is, it doesn't matter about the particular nature of the individual with human beings. With the angels, it's directly proportionate. When they fell, gaps, not in the natural hierarchy, it can't be replaced because God doesn't create angels to restore that particular part. Because if He did create that particular nature, there would be nothing to separate it from the demon that fell because they'd have the same nature. See, the reason why human beings, you can have a number of different human beings that have the same natures because we have different bodies. It's our bodies that keeps us distinct from each other. Okay, well, angels aren't that way. So the natural hierarchy cannot be reconstituted, but the hierarchy of grace has these gaps, and God created angels, or created man, to fill up the gaps in these hierarchies, which means that God originally intended for you to reach a certain level. That's why St. Paul says, run to win the prize. Because there's these gaps, there's this particular level that you should strive for in that. And every time you commit a sin, and every time you don't do what you're supposed to do, you fall short of it. So then what do? You create someone else to follow your spot. But the point is that you should be striving for the highest place possible, because God gives you the amount of actual grace in your life proportionate to where He wants you to be in heaven. And so you should have absolute fidelity to grace, which means every single time He gives you that nudge to pray, go do it. And then you'll reach that place you're supposed to. Every time you don't, you go down and someone else gets your place. So, yes.
And lose your place, you can't future marriage, you can't reach. You lose a certain level of heaven, you can never do any more to get back to where you were.
You can do supererogatory works, which will actually be the works that are above and beyond your obligations and duties in life, and you can get back up there. So, yes.
Like when you sin and go to convention, or you back up far, or you below?
Yeah, well, it depends on which theologian you want to follow, actually. But your place in heaven is determined by how much sanctifying grace you have, ultimately. But your sanctifying grace is proportionate to a number of different things, the amount of charity you have, the excellence in virtue, the good works that you did, the meritorious works. That's what determines your place in heaven. And God had originally intended you to do certain works, certain things, and when you fail to do those, or when you commit sin, you detract from that which you were supposed to achieve. But you can do things above and beyond what you were supposed to necessarily have done, or what's required by your duties in your state in life. Supererogatory, that's above and beyond what we're obligated to do. And those works will actually give you a higher, will kind of restore you back up to that. When you commit a mortal sin, for example, and you go to confession, the general opinion is that once you get back into the state of grace, the merits from your prior works revive. That is, you still get them back. There's a few who say they don't, but the majority of the theologians say you get all that merit back. So you are actually restored in a certain sense to that level of merit that you would have in the past. But you also have to recognize that when you die, and if there's any imperfections in your soul that you should have eradicated, that's going to detract you from that. You go to purgatory to get rid of them, but once you die, you can't make up for that. So, yes.
I'm in a prayer group because I want to name your God and I didn't really feel like that was necessary. Well, what you're talking about donating and so on.
The Vatican is forbidding people to do that. There's certain groups that actually have people name their guardian angel. And the Vatican has said, no, you can't do that. And there's a reason why you don't name your guardian angel. You don't have authority over it. He has authority over you, that's why you don't name it. Yes, if you communicate his name to you, fine, but the problem is that you're, by trying to gain knowledge of something which is revealed to you as a superstitious practice, and you can become influenced. So you have to be careful. That's one of the reasons I tell people stay away from that kind of thing. It doesn't mean you don't pray your guardian angel regularly, obviously. It just means, you don't name him Fred or whatever. But, yeah.
In terms of the life that you get to name your grace on the person, is that due to the Bible crime and also with?
It's due to a mechanism called disassociation, which I'll explain in the subsequent conference. So it's also a problem that many actors have. It's also a problem that children who are physically abused have. But that's something which we'll deal with. Yes.
So God is all powerful and all-knowing.
These boots are made from a single piece of premium American leather tanned in Pennsylvania. They're built to last. The leather is pretty special. Small scratches basically heal themselves. And with a Gore-Tex waterproof lining,
right.
And they've been around since before the time of man.
Right.
So why would you create a demon?
Knowing that they would fall. It's the same question, why would you create man knowing that they would fall? Because that's a good fight. No, it's actually because he creates people with free will and angels with free will, and what he really wants is to pack his house with people that love him. That's ultimately what you get into heaven for, is for loving him. So he created them knowing that they would fall, but that doesn't mean he's the cause. It just means that he accepted that because it meant that the people who would have to deal with evil people and demons and things of that sort would become holier and better people and gain a higher place and greater happiness in heaven than by if everything was all laid out. So it's really about glory. His glory is more perfectly manifest in you struggling against these things and becoming better. So God gets a certain glory even out of the demons because of the fact that, he beats up on them and humiliates them. And that shows his perfect justice. So there's certain reasons for it. Not that he intended, not that he wanted that to happen, but he allowed it to happen. So, yes.
All kinds of major angels now, but if he's a favor to say things to angels, do you have to send their name or is that
To move forward. Because normally speaking, the normal course of things is God doesn't reveal it to the particular individual. So you shouldn't really be trying to seek after that knowledge, because it's not necessary for your salvation. Ultimately, it's not going to help you. It might make you feel better, but it doesn't mean anything ultimately. What you really should be doing, you can just name it, my guardian angel. And I think that's actually what God intends for most people is to not know. I mean, the actual names of people who know their guardian angels is very, very, very few. So, yes. Yes, all of the ranks lost members through damnation.
Somebody told me once not to jail right or wrong, jail where you're thinking right.
Yes and no. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. That's something I'll deal with a little bit later in the other conferences. Because there's certain things they can figure out. There's certain things they can't. There's certain things that are hidden from them. There's certain things about what's going on in you that's revealed to them. There are certain times when people receive a particular grace from God, and that's revealed to the angels, to the demons. And, as I said, that's one of the reasons why they go to the party. But others, there's other things they don't know. That's something I'll talk a little bit more about in the other conference. Yeah.
With regard to exorcism, the exorcist giving the name of the demon and so on, information, how do they know that the demon is lying about his name?
Well, when it first says you just keep beating on him because usually what will happen is you keep beating on it, he'll do what you. Their psychology is very similar to ours, by the way. They don't like a beating. So eventually, they might lie to you, and then you start beating on them, and they realize, okay, you didn't believe me, I got to tell him. And that's what's happening. And a lot of times, too, the exorcist will kind of know he's lying to him because there's other things surrounding it that give me an indication, and you tell me the truth. So you just beat up on them again for a while, and then if they're telling the truth, they'll be consistent. But if they're lying, they won't be consistent. It's just like human beings, when they lie, they're not consistent. So, yes. Well, he's the highest place in heaven is taken by our grace.